Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar promoted by SoftExpert. Today's event introduces the webinar, Management of an Effective CAPA. The webinar will be conducted by Mr. Tim Fischer, manager at a consulting group focused on Quality 4.0 software initiatives, GMP quality systems, auditing, and FDA and supplier remediation. I wish you all a great webinar.
Good afternoon, or good evening, or perhaps good morning, wherever you might be in the world today. Very excited to present this topic today, and I really appreciate the opportunity from ISPE to present. I hope this audience is doing well through the COVID situation. Just for a little bit of where I'm at in the world, I live and work in South Carolina here in the States, and it's just south of Charlotte. And today we're actually experiencing a tropical storm is coming through off the Gulf Coast. So if you hear a little bit of wind and rain in the background, I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Also a small disclaimer, I have my daughter and son-in-law and 6-year-old granddaughter living with us. And so when they get up and get ready for work and school, there may be a little commotion. So just a disclaimer there. Well, today's topic is one that I find quite fascinating just because there's so many facets and so many different thoughts on how an effective CAPA should be and could be managed. So as we go through the next hour or so, I certainly hope this is informative. I usually put a little bit more graphical type pictures and such in my slides just to make them a little bit more interesting. But I have put quite a bit of text, assuming that we can share this presentation. And of course, my goal, as always, would be that you can take this information and actually utilize it in your world, and that it would be informative and useful. But along the way, I can't help but, as you can tell, tell a few stories and certainly make it more interesting than just working through some slides. So again, thank you for your time today. I know everybody's busy, and I certainly do hope at the end of the presentation that you have gotten some good value out of this. One more item, since I know the majority of you are in India. My wife actually has worked for Dr. Reddy Labs as well as Cipla. She's in the government pricing side of the business. So she's had the privilege of visiting Mumbai. I have not been to India. I've been all over the world, but India is still certainly on the bucket list. So I look forward to potentially meeting some of you at some point. Okay, with that, let me proceed here to the agenda. So we're going to cover the bullet points, obviously, that you're seeing in front of the presentation. I did want to provide the audience a really good background in terms of the regulatory requirements. I'm assuming many of you are in the quality arena, and it's always helpful to understand exactly what the strategy and the structure behind the drivers of what a good CAPA looks like, and there's plenty of regulatory backbone that we can certainly share today. And then I thought it was important to take a look at the elements of a good CAPA procedure. I'm sure that within the worlds that you operate, you probably have these procedures that I'm sure they're quite robust. But for those of you that might be in more of a startup situation or a smaller company, and you're still kind of figuring out what that CAPA procedure should look like, absolutely wanted to cover that and make sure that we had plenty of time to build that structure and framework for a good procedure. And then the very important part of a CAPA is the identification of the issue. There's a lot of approaches you can certainly take when you develop a CAPA, Corrective Action, Preventive Action program. And so we'll talk through some of how that works. And not only the identification, but the evaluation of the problem itself, and then certainly the investigation of the failure. And then, I want to talk through a little bit on what that approval for a corrective preventive action should look like. As many of you probably know, CAPAs can be quite burdensome. There's a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes. And so I definitely want to be able to give you some understanding of what that approval process looks like as you develop the corrective and preventive action. And then the all-important piece for you project managers out there, the implementation of the action plan. it's great to be able to develop and surmise an approach through your investigation, but sometimes the hardest work is actually getting that action plan implemented. So we definitely want to talk through some ideas and thoughts around how to really structure a good action plan and make sure that the requirements get completed. And finally, we'll talk about the very important effectiveness check. You've done a great job investigating, you've identified the problem, you've implemented the action plan, but then you have to come back, at a regular period of intervals and really determine if that CAPA and the work that you put into it or your team put into it actually is effective. So I think this will be a pretty comprehensive approach to what this CAPA looks like, and we'll certainly start working through this agenda. So with that, the regulatory requirements. So CAPA really comes out of course, I know all of you, for the most part, I assume all of you are familiar with the FDA 21 CFR requirements to some degree. And I also understand this is probably the majority of a pharmaceutical audience, but it's important to understand the structure behind the regulatory requirements, and where CAPA is absolutely best defined is in 21 CFR 820.100. And of course, that's the medical device QSR regulation, but it is the basis for where the FDA has taken this idea behind the CAPA and seen it spread across not only med device, but certainly pharmaceutical and biotech as well. So we'll read through and kind of highlight some of the key words here. But it is important, according to the FDA, that each manufacturer does establish and maintain procedures for implementing corrective and preventive action. And of course, the critical part of that is the identification of the cause of these nonconformities. And we'll talk a little bit about where the triggers or the feeders come from a CAPA, and what are the inputs as you look at a CAPA process, and how do we drive that. But it's all around nonconformities. And this other bullet point that we're looking at, identifying the actions needed to correct and prevent recurrence. We're going to talk quite a bit about that, because at the end of the day, and I'm sure many of you face this, CAPAs should be used on a limited basis. I do quite a bit of auditing, and what I find is companies are, they're going overboard with the use of a CAPA. A CAPA should really be refined and used in a particular way. And we'll certainly talk about that as well. And then verifying or validating that the CAPA is effective and that the finished product is not adversely affected. So this is definitely the structure and the core framework for where the idea of a CAPA came from. So implementing and recording those changes. Recording the change, and again, I'll highlight some of these words. So the changes in your methods and your procedures needed to correct a quality issue. So that's where you're really capturing this information and trying to make some semblance out of what you're facing. Bullet point number 2, ensuring that the quality problem information is communicated. So that's where we're going to talk about action plans and how to really effectively communicate this CAPA and make sure that everybody on your team, not just from quality, but operations, it could be the warehouse, it could be purchasing, across the whole gamut, a CAPA can have a lot of tentacles. And so it's important that that information's communicated properly. And then submitting the relevant information of the quality to your management team. And, as we all know, especially under ISO 9001 and the quality management guidelines that have come out in recent years, management, and I'm sure some of you face this, it's very important that they understand what is going on, especially with the CAPA process. And so we'll talk about how that information gets communicated out to them and what the most effective way to communicate to your management team is. So that's really the core basis, the 21 CFR 820 medical device reg. Now, a question, and I get asked this quite a bit, especially as smaller companies, we're not a medical device company, right? we're not regulated under 820, but there is a crossover, and the FDA has made that quite clear, and we'll actually talk through some 483 observations that show that. But here's 21 CFR 211, more on the pharmaceutical side of the business. There shall be a quality unit with responsibility and authority to approve and reject. I think everybody understands that. I have operations, I have quality, and both report up to, you know, your senior management team, but both act independently. Again, I'm sure that's a given for everybody on this call, and you understand that, but that independence is really critical. Number two, the quality unit has the authority to review production batch records and assure, and that's a very strong word, no errors have occurred. So again, we're starting to look for these non-conformities, non-conformances that might possibly affect your end product quality. Number three, if errors have occurred, that they are fully investigated. I'm going to show you a 483 observation from the FDA that is, if you look at it, you kind of scratch your head and say, what was this company thinking? But the problem they had is it wasn't fully investigated. It was more like, and I'm sure you all face this to a certain degree, a checkbox. Okay, I did this, and now I can call myself done. And that's not the way CAPAs operate. And then the quality unit shall have responsibility for approving and rejecting drug products. So what this sums up in the pharmaceutical world is how important that you take this CAPA process and utilize it as a tool, as a methodology to continuously improve your business, again, versus saying, well, because the FDA says this, I guess I better do it, right? And I liken this to parenting. And I had a webinar a few weeks back, and I used the same example, right? For those companies that take this process seriously and apply it as good business practice, those companies are very successful because these rules of engagement are truly meant to improve and bring continuous improvement to your operation. All right, let's talk about the European UDLEX Volume 4. A quality system is appropriate for manufacturer will ensure, here we go again, the results of batch release, including investigations of deviations and preventive actions, are in place to avoid recurrence. I want to park there for a minute. So as we define and think about what a CAPA is, it's really a means and a method to understand and capture a problem, a quality problem that continues to happen, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what that really important word recurrence means, because CAPA and recurrence, those are two, they're not synonymous words, but they're extremely, there's a lot of correlation there. And I find so often, again, that companies just overuse this idea of a CAPA. Used properly, used effectively, it's a great tool, but you just don't want to, you know, to swamp yourself with unnecessary CAPAs. An appropriate level of root cause analysis should be applied. So again, we're seeing these same things. Bullet point number 3, an appropriate corrective and preventive actions should be identified and taken in response to investigations. Identified and taken. Yes, there is action, there's activity, there's drivers that move this idea of a CAPA forward. And you have to review, you know, all batches that failed specification. And believe me, I come from a quality background. I've been in operations, I've been in laboratory, but I've also been in quality for a number of years. And there is no worse feeling than your, you know, some a QA specialist coming and putting some paperwork on your desk and showing that you're out of specification. And as you know, that creates a whole ripple effect of reaction, right? So what we're trying to do with the CAPA is really be proactive, right? We see there's a problem. We've identified that there's a problem, and now we're going to try to do something about that. And then the final bullet point, a review of all quality-related returns, complaints, and recalls. That's a very short list. There are many, many inputs of information that can form the basis of a CAPA. So that's from the European standpoint. Now let's talk about the ICH documents, because they define it and put a little bit more meat to it and really help you understand what that CAPA process looks like. The quality system should include corrective and preventive action. We're again seeing the same thing. There should be a system for implementing corrective and preventive action resulting from, and this is a really good list. So as you think about all the inputs to what drives a CAPA, it should come from the investigation of complaints, right? You've got customer complaints coming in from the field. You've got product rejections, non-conformances, recalls, deviations, audits, regulatory inspections and findings. And here's another key word for today is trends, right? And so a lot of times, really good companies, they are able to do these trend analysis and may not quite be going out of the upper spec limit or the lower spec limit, but they can see they're moving in the wrong direction. And sometimes that's when it's appropriate to start a CAPA before you actually have, we'll call it a forest fire, right? Before it gets to that point, let's really dig in and take a look at it and try to figure out exactly what this trend analysis and trend monitoring is looking like. And that comes from process performance, SPC, statistical process control. It's just a great tool, especially in the operation side, where you can kind of get a feel for how your operation and production are running. And again, if you see something trending in the wrong direction, it may be time to think about getting ahead of that. All right. So here's basically the way that they frame it out. It's a structured approach to investigations. Structured. So in my dealings throughout my career, I've had interesting situations that have called for CAPAs. One of the biggest situations we had at one of the companies I worked for, name withheld to protect the innocent, was foreign tablets. And we just could not, our operations team, we were doing the major cleanings in between runs. There was double inspection going on. We actually hired an outside firm to come in and figure out what was going on. And that took a lot of structure, right? It wasn't a, boy, I think it looks like we might have a problem here. So I think maybe we better do something about it. Let's fire up a CAPA, right? That is the absolute wrong approach. This should be a very structured approach, and it should be very determinate in trying to get to that root cause. Bullet point 2, the level of effort, formality, and documentation should be based on risk, right? ICH Q9, quality risk management. I shouldn't say I love that document. That's the wrong, that's an American way to say that I think that document is absolutely amazing. The way that they put risks together, the way that you structure risk. There should be some type of risk determination before you jump in and really get started with this CAPA. Finally, CAPA methodology. It should result in product and process improvement and enhance understanding. Again, that's embracing the concept of a CAPA and really what it's all about. And here's some of the regulatory requirements, and I think this is a really important statement, right? And this comes from ISO. Corrective versus preventive action. Action to eliminate the cause of a detected nonconformity or other undesirable situation. I'm going to read that again. Action to eliminate the cause of a detected nonconformity or other undesirable situation. You all face very undesirable situations. Working in quality can be stressful. Everything's coming at you. You have a stack of to-do items that is this tall that you're trying to get through, and now someone is presenting another problem. I fully get that where you find yourself in that position, and yet you have to sort through that and really plan for it. So we're trying to eliminate the cause of a detected nonconformity or other undesirable situation. And then note, corrective action is taken, this is really important, to prevent recurrence, whereas preventive action is taken to prevent occurrence, right? So if you've done it, you've got to do the corrective action and modify a situation, an undesirable situation, a nonconformity. That's corrective action. You're trying to prevent it from occurring again. Preventive action is taken to prevent occurrence in the first place. So we'll talk more about that as we get going here. Excuse me. Still early in the morning. Let me have a quick cup of coffee. Okay. So here's some graphics. This is the ICHQ10 document. What I want to point out in this is within the core, as you go through your development, your tech transfer, your commercial manufacturing, notice what that pharmaceutical quality system consists of: corrective action, preventive action. This is how important this piece is in terms of your overall quality system. And so, you've got your process improvement, you've got change management, and notice we talked about that really, really critical management review piece. And again, what drives this whole understanding is I want to better understand my process. I want to better understand how to mitigate problems that we're having with this product. That is your and my job, to continuously, I hate to use the word force, but continuously put pressure on the organization to get better and better and better. And well-run pharmaceutical, med device, biotech companies who grasp that and embrace that do quite well for themselves. All right. So it's an older slide, and I apologize that it's a little outdated. I was looking for something a little bit more recent, but my guess is, and I'm quite sure that this is still the case, look at from a domestic and a foreign provider. Of course, this is from the FDA here in the States, but look at where CAPAs sit, right? So I really want to dissect why that keeps happening. Why do CAPAs keep showing up on the radar as this really critical, that it's a requirement, and yet companies continue to fail to do it well? So we'll dissect that a little bit. Now here is, these are terrible. And I will have to say, I've had a few of these in my world. As director of compliance, I've dealt with the FDA directly. I've had to do the mitigation with the FDA. I was hired in one job to take care and really mitigate a warning letter. So this is kind of information you do not want to see. So this is a Form 483. Let's read through this real quick. 20 out of 20 non-conformance reports reviewed, as well as their associated root cause CAPA investigations, were inadequate based on the following. Now let's step back a minute. 20 out of 20 non-conformance reports. Would you say this company had a good handle on what to do with a CAPA or how to handle non-conformances? Absolutely not. If maybe one or two non-conformances, you're still going to get a 483. But this is a clue that this particular company really had no idea how to manage through this. Investigations are not complete, and potential root causes are not always identified, right? Again, that gets back to that. It's an approach. It's a method. It's a way of thinking. Am I just checking off a box here to say that I did it and meet the regulation? Again, that child in your family that is non-compliant and just goes through the motions to get certain things done just to please you. That is the wrong approach in a regulated industry like pharmaceutical, med device, biotech. So here they go into the specific detail. But again, it's this first sentence is extremely telling. Investigations are not complete, and potential root causes are not always identified. All right, so what are we going to do? I'm going to present you information that this should never happen, right? We're just going to say, I'm committed. This is not going to happen to us. It's a way of thinking. Good. All right, so that's enough of the regulations in the background. Elements of the procedure. Let's talk through that. So here's the requirements. And this is really good information. I've taken it from several sources just to make sure that what I presented today is efficient and it makes the most sense to this particular team. So the requirement, it's a closed loop process, including workflow and sign off. What does that mean? We have a beginning point and we have an ending point. It's a closed loop. We see that in 21 CFR Part 11, a closed software system, right? It manages from A to Z, or A to Z, as they would say in the UK. The document needs to ensure documentation of corrective and preventive action, that proper activities are established. And these are steps, right? Activities are tasks. I have these particular things that I have to go through to really have this effective CAPA. And that the activities are established. That means there has to be some thought behind it, right? In other words, the activities have to be predefined. they're defined, they're documented. So there has to be some means by which your rationale that you're going through for with this CAPA is not only documented, but it's captured and it's complete. And most importantly, we saw in that FDA 483 observation that they're implemented, right? So that is the overriding approach to this big CAPA document. And again, I appreciate that many of you probably have very, very good CAPA systems in place. But for those of you who don't, this is where it gets started. It has to manage the CAPA process, including the tasks, the very important assignments. That becomes a really critical part of a CAPA, is who is responsible for what, right? Let's say it's a packaging line issue. Let's go back to my example of foreign tablets. Who are the assignments? Who is directly responsible for making sure that what action needs to take place is actually taking place? Deadlines. Oh, I don't know about you. I have to confess, I'm kind of a deadline junkie, if I can use that word. When a deadline is sitting in front of me, that's when I'm most effective. When it's kind of an open-ended, we'll get it done when we get it done, that doesn't work as well for me as if I know I've got a deadline. So that's a really important component of a CAPA procedure. What are the deadlines, right? And then all connected to affected product and documents. So a good CAPA, and here we're talking about a procedure, should be all encompassing. It should consider all aspects of what the impact is, and that, especially in a product issue, that could be all the way from your raw material supplier. We all know how supplier quality issues can pop up, and that could be the final cause. Everywhere from your raw materials to your incoming, your transportation, your receipt in the warehouse, your sampling, it goes through the laboratory, you go through manufacturing, you go through packaging, it sits in the warehouse, it gets loaded on a truck and it gets shipped out to the customer, right? That whole chain of command, that has to be considered when you think about, that it's that all those processes are absolutely connected. The ability to capture, review, approve, control, and retrieve a corrective action procedure to determine when verification can be conducted in lieu of validation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. As you look at a CAPA and you've come up with, part of your procedure must be, do we need to do some kind of just verification for an effectiveness check, or has the process or the equipment or the procedure's been so affected that we might need to reconsider some validation here? Again, I do not want to put this big burden on this group that I'm speaking to of all these requirements. Use a risk-based decision, decide if verification, which just simply means some type of observation, versus having to go through a full-blown validation effort. That decision in and of itself, again, should be risk-based. There should be rationale as part of your CAPA procedure. And what you want to try to do is the FDA uses this word, the least burdensome approach, to make sure that your CAPA is effective and that the methodology you're using to check that effectiveness does include, do we need to revalidate or do some kind of validation effort here? Okay. So here we go. This actually comes from Master Control. I'm very familiar with their system. It popped up on their website, so I felt it's probably the most effective graphic I could see. So here is where this whole thing kind of comes together, right? So these are your inputs, your complaints, your audits, your non-conformances, your out of specifications, your deviations, right? And this is what your procedure should actually look like. So the reason I thought it was important to include this is these are the components of your procedure. Your issue review, first of all, let me rewind on that. First of all, part of your CAPA procedure should be a CAPA determination, right? You don't want to just jump in and start doing a CAPA if you don't have to. So, you you take a look at it and you take a look at the disposition and the understanding of what this issue became. So you do that issue review, you start your data gathering, and if this doesn't look like, if it looks like a one-off kind of situation, it looks like it was an outlier, it looks like it's really not that serious, and it goes back to, does it affect product quality? Does it affect patient safety? Does it affect data integrity? That's what risk, those are the three components that you look at from a risk. If it doesn't have an impact on those things, do not start a CAPA, because once you go down that CAPA path, you are committed. And now you've got resources and everybody tied up in trying to mitigate this thing. There may be situations, and this should be part of your procedure, where you do a CAPA determination and say, nope, that is not deserving of a CAPA, and here's the reason why. Close it out, be done with it. But what happens if that same issue in 2 weeks pops up again? Now we need to kind of scratch our head and think about that a little bit. Now we're talking recurrence. That may be the means and the reason to start a CAPA like this. So again, the issue review, data gathering, risk assessment, do your containment activity. That typically is part of your incident management SOP, right? That we had a problem coming off the packaging line, we've secured the product that was affected, we've set it off to the side and quarantined it, and there's some kind of disposition that needs to take place on that. So that's usually within your incident SOP, but that can become, especially if you have a major issue or it becomes a reoccurring issue, you may need to capture that containment activity within your procedure. Disposition, CAPA not required, issue gets closed, and then you're just going to track and trend. Issue, now I need to think about, I do have a problem, I need to move to that CAPA procedure, so now we're going to escalate it, investigation, root cause, corrective action, verification, implementation, effectiveness check, management approval, QA disposition, right? So again, this is the perfect diagram for what a good CAPA procedure should look like. All right, let's talk about identification of the issue. So I have kind of been, pushing on this, and I'm going to continue to push on it because there are so many companies, and the reason that many companies get in trouble with CAPAs is because they're not using them effectively. All right. So I'm an FDA inspector, and I've actually done mock inspection work where I prepare companies for FDA inspections. So the first thing in terms of a CAPA, and this is my progression even as an auditor, show me your CAPA procedure. Read through it. Okay, great. It's got all the elements that I would be looking for. Now show me your CAPA log, right? And this should be whether it's done in a compliance software like TrackWise or Master Control or ETQ Reliance, Viva, all those systems. Generate or produce for me the CAPA log. Oh, look, you've got 50 CAPAs here. 47 of them have been closed, but these 3 haven't, and they're past the deadline. I would like to see those CAPA records. So now the inspector is going to ask for those records. He's going to go through them, and that is when you should probably start sweating, because he's picked up on the fact that you've got 3 open CAPAs, and they're not really, the effort that should be required is not being put into them. Okay, so reoccurrence, again, do these things keep popping up over and over and again? If they don't, that's not a CAPA. If it's a one-off situation, if it happens again, and maybe even happens a 3rd time, that's the trigger to really initiate this CAPA. So we've talked about the sources, right? Deviations, complaints, returns, service repairs, adverse events, audits, non-conformances, rework, out of specification, out of tolerance in terms of calibration. And all of these logs get reviewed by an FDA inspector, and those can be the basis. Like, you have had this exact same problem in the last 3 months, 3 times. Where's the CAPA, right? So what is the frequency of those systemic issues? Is there a trend, right? So and this is not written anywhere. It has just been good practice for me. As we all know, a trend line requires 3 dots, right? 2 dots is a line. But if you put a third dot in there, now I can draw a trend line through it. For me, a trend has always been the same issue happening 3 times in a row within a certain given period of time. You have to define that. I'm not going to give you any kind of requirement on what that might look like. But for me, in the way that I've written CAPA procedures, if the same issue pops up 3 times within a given time period, maybe it's 3 months or 6 months, that's when you should really put a CAPA in play, because you do absolutely have a problem at that point. And here's what I've been saying over and over again. Please do yourself a favor, do your company a favor, do your boss a favor. Do not go into CAPA overload. Use it sparingly, but effectively. And if there's any takeaway from today's session with this group, with this lovely group that I'm talking to today, this is it. Don't go into CAPA overload. Use it sparingly, but effectively. Okay, so let's talk about evaluation of the problem, right? Again, one of my favorite documents out there, the risk-based approach based on ICH-Q9. Risk identification is the systemic use of information to identify hazards, referring to the risk question or the problem description. So this information, here we go, can include historical data. What is historical data? We're monitoring trends, theoretical analysis, informed opinions. I always run into this question. So a lot of times in quality, we don't just stick to the facts. It's a gut check kind of thing. I think you all know what I might be talking about. You just have this sense something's not right here. You need to take a look at that. That's an informed opinion, right? You have the sense that something's off with a process or a test method or whatever it might be, right? That's that gut feel, you should follow it as a quality person. And what are the concerns of the stakeholders? We all know in the pharmaceutical, med device, biotech world that our end customer is that patient that's taken that injectable, swallowing that pill, doing the inhaler or the aerosol, right? And the whole reason, as many of you know, that these good manufacturing practices exist is because patients do not have the ability to quality test the product that you're producing. What do I mean by that? I use this example. Frito-Lay makes potato chips, and you open up a bag of chips and they don't smell right, right? They smell rancid. It looks like it's out of expiration. Consumers have the ability to understand them. There may be an issue with this product. Not always the case with food products, but a lot of times you can sense an issue. When you're laying on a hospital bed and you take an IV, you don't have any control over the quality initiatives that went in to make sure that that IV solution is perfect, sterile, effective, pure, and and doing what it's supposed to do. So that's why this whole exists. Is you need to take this information, and that's what risk thinking is about. What impact could this have if I don't do something about this problem and I don't react to it? What is the impact to that end consumer? And here's the identification question. What might go wrong? That includes identifying the possible consequences, right? And again, it's this thinking, wow, looks like we may have a problem here. Where could it get worse and what could go wrong? And that provides the basis of risk management. Is this truly a critical risk? Is it a major risk? Is it a minor risk? Does it affect product quality, patient safety, or data integrity? All right, so risk analysis is the estimation of risk associated with hazards. Again, you're talking through this. It's qualitative or quantitative process thinking. It's considering the likelihood of an occurrence or severity of harm. So that's risk analysis. Risk evaluation compares the identified and analyzed risk against a certain risk category. Again, where this applies to CAPA is you want to do some kind of CAPA determination. You want to make a risk-based decision. You want to document it and have rationale for that. And here are the 3 key components to that, right? So uncertainty is due to a combination, here we go. and we saw it on that 483 from the FDA, incomplete knowledge about a process and unexpected variability, right? Well, hopefully your R&D team, as they've made this transition and they've moved this product forward, that they have done a FEMA, an FMEA, and they understand what all those different hazard components might be. But we're human, right? We don't have complete knowledge, and we do have variability, and that's what's got to be ascertained as we think about these CAPAs. Typical source of uncertainty: gaps in knowledge, gaps in pharmaceutical science and process understanding, gaps in sources of harm, right? And the probability of detection of these problems. That's what a CAPA is all about. This forms the basis for what a good CAPA situation should look like. So here we go. This is a good summary. What might go wrong without mitigation? What is the likelihood or probability it will continue to go wrong? What are the consequences, the severity, if it continues to go wrong? And so I'm a big believer in use a risk to make a CAPA determination, use some type of risk assessment, a matrix. And again, that to me, that should be part of your procedure. And then you really, really want to seek the counsel. So bring your material review board together, bring your quality review board together to make these decisions, document the decision rationale, and make sure that quality has signed off on that, right? So I'm sitting around a table, we're all kind of brainstorming, thinking through, wow, this product issue has popped up 3 times in the last 3 months. We got a problem here. What do we need to do about it? And that's what your procedure should really take you through, is that methodology and approach. So this is just I just threw this out there. So here's a rough idea of how you make a CAPA determination based on risk. Was it just a documentation error? There's no product impact, there's no product status, and absolutely not, we do not need to do a CAPA investigation, right? Now I'm gonna stop here just for a minute, because documentation errors typically are on, personnel, right? They're the one making the documentation error. Well, what I have found with CAPAs, and the FDA will ding you on this, is a lot of people, when they investigate CAPAs, always point to some kind of human cause, right? Human error. And so there's retraining. And to be frank, retraining is way too easy of a action plan for an effective CAPA. Dig deep and really understand what's going on. Was it a minor issue? How to determine if it's minor? Was there product impact? No. The product status was fine. Is a CAPA required? It might be. It's not mandatory, but it might be. A major CAPA determination, there is a potential for a product impact. It's not distributed yet, so we still have it captured in the warehouse. But in this case, you definitely probably are going to require a CAPA. And then a critical, there's potential product impact. It's already out in the marketplace, and absolutely you want that CAPA to be completed. So investigation of the failure. Here's, again, just kind of a summary, root cause determination. So once you've made that CAPA determination, you've done your risk assessment, you have decided that, yes, you need to go forward a CAPA. Now let's get really at that investigation and find that root cause. Determine if the failure investigation procedures are being followed. This comes out of the FDA inspection manual. So this is what FDA inspectors are looking for. Determine if the degree to which a quality problem or non-conforming product is investigated and is commensurate with the significance and risk of the non-conformity. What does that mean? Is the action being taken enough to actually solve that problem? Is it a light investigation? Did they kind of gloss over it? Or are they really digging in and getting to the heart of what that issue is? Determine if the failure investigations are conducted to identify a true root cause where possible. I hate to say it, but there are times when you won't necessarily get to that root cause. And so now you just have to put it on a monitoring situation. That does happen. And I don't like when that happens. I'm sure you don't like when that happens. When I worked at Abbott in the diagnostics world, we'd use a design of experiment, right? It's a way to test all the variables. And sometimes I worked in the pregnancy test line. So the Fact Plus, which was the J&J product. And there were times when we could not absolutely determine what that root cause was, but in that case, you put it on a monitoring situation and verify that there is control for preventing distribution of non-conforming product, right? That gets part of your preventive action. So again, this is from the FDA inspection guide. When they're unable to identify root causes and subsequently keep insufficient records of those events, their internal investigations are deemed incomplete. We look back at that FDA 483, what was the issue? Their investigations weren't thorough and they weren't complete. So as an FDA person, inspector comes in, they're looking to see, did they keep really good records? Did they do a good job at the investigation? Or again, getting back to that whole, did they just check off a box and move on without really getting at that root cause? And here we go. If a company does not perform its quality due diligence, I love that word, due diligence, in the investigation of these types of events, such as oversights could have long-lasting damage on a company's reputation and its branded products. Not to mention, remember what I said about, swallowing that pill or taking that IV or doing that inhaler? Without proper approach to these CAPAs, you could have catastrophic results for consumers. Nobody wants that. So let's talk a little bit about root cause types. I am still a fan. There is, you got all these big fancy tools out there, right? And they've kind of developed as the quality movement has come through the ages. I am still a massive fan of getting subject matter experts in a room, buy them lunch, make sure they got plenty of coffee, right? Take good care of them and get that whiteboard exercise going in terms of brainstorming, because that's where you really get the input that you need to say, we've got this problem. Who do we need to solve that? Now, what's important here? It's important that you document what occurred in that brainstorming whiteboard analysis, right? A lot of times I'll snap a picture of the whiteboard. We've figured it out. We think it could be this, this, or this. I'll snap a picture because that's part of the rationale of the decision-making that went in to solve this thing. Fishbone diagram, Ishikawa cause and effect. We'll look at a couple of these, and I'm sure you guys are quite familiar with a lot of this. The Pareto analysis, 80%, it's the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of this is fine. It's the 20% that becomes really, really hard to assess in terms of root cause analysis. And it can be based, 80% are based on the known problems. It's that 20% that we don't truly understand. Again, there's some process variability. There's some information that we haven't thought through. And that's the information that you got to capture, because lying within that, the needle in the haystack, may be the exact root cause you need to actually solve this particular issue you're going through. A fault tree analysis, FMEA. A lot of times this is done at the R&D phase, where they take you through an FMEA and really identify all the potential causes and issues. So here's a good method, right? This is the, identify the problem statement. Can the cause and solution be quickly identified? This is a very common approach, the 5 whys, right? The 5 whys. You ask these 5 questions. Understand the process in more detail. Flowchart, timeline, sequence of events, diagrams, drawings, photos, interviews. Sometimes people who are involved in this process, they actually have a way better understanding than even a quality person has. Get those people in a room. Again, take really good care of them. Take all the fear. This is not an interrogation. We're just trying to understand what happened here, and get some narrative chronology. Use root cause analysis tools to seek Fishbone. These are all tools that are out there. Verify causes are correct. And so even when we talk about this 5 whys, why did this happen? Why? You just keep driving and driving until you actually get to what you think. And it's not going to be one root cause. A lot of times there's correlation between several items that have to be solved and verified and figured out. All right. So here's an example of the 5 whys. State the problem, identify an indicator, ask why is this the case, right? And you want to do that without, again, putting fear in people. You're just trying to be a good investigator. For the reason you just gave, ask, why is that case? Again, you told me this. So I don't have a perfect example here, but you know, let me use we'll use the grocery store example. You know, my wife goes to the grocery store and she comes home and the bill is $500. I'm going to ask why. And she says, well, because of this, this, and this. Well, why was that so expensive? You know, you just continue to drive for that why. And at the end of the day, she, you know, I'm teasing about my wife, but she bought for my 6-year-old granddaughter, she, of the $500 she spent at the groceries, $100 was just snacks. So at the end of the day, why was this so expensive? It's because, you know, she bought all these snacks for my 6-year-old granddaughter, which was fine. But now I understand, and I have an understanding of the process and what the concern was there, because I kept asking these why questions. And by the time you get to the fourth or fifth why, you might see something that resembles the root cause, right? Okay. Here's Ishikawa, the fishbone. And I like this. I've used this in the past. I call it the 6M approach, right? And man is generic, of course. That can absolutely include women. It's really more related to personnel. It just fits into this nice 6M kind of thing. So all of these, you know, man, machine, methods, measurement, materials, and Mother Nature, right? And that's where you start doing your analysis and you try to figure out, in this case, we had a production code that went wrong. So this is from the basically the British Food Council, but I thought it was a good thing. Root cause analysis is a problem-solving process, conducting an investigation, identifying an incident, problem, concern, and nonconformity. It's a completely separate process from incident management and immediate corrective action. CAPAs are not that, although they are often in close proximity. Individuals tasked with ascertaining the underlying root cause must look beyond the obvious. I love that, right? Don't just assume you know what the problem is. And that happens so many times. Look beyond the obvious and make a serious attempt to pinpoint the root cause. And the good news is there are tools available for investigators to help, I really like this, facilitate their quest, right? This is like, oh my goodness, we have a problem here. I'm going to put my thinking cap on and we're really going to chase this thing down. All right, approval of corrective action. I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. Plan the resolution. You should develop an action plan. Action should be completed. Requirement document specification changes made. Any necessary process, procedures, or system changes you have to look at. Employee training might be required. Again, that can typically be overused. Future monitors or controls. So if we're seeing this trend and we need to put some kind of monitoring in place, that's what can be used for preventing reoccurrence. There's that word again. And the people within the organization, you know, you need to identify who is responsible for completing each task. So this is the resolution plan or the mitigation plan. And these are the important components of that. Again, that should be part of a good procedure. For every solution, there's a cost, right? So you go to your management team and say, wow, we've got a problem on the production line. We need to modify some equipment. What are they thinking? They're thinking cost. What is this going to cost me? So you have to consider several things for eliminating that root cause. Are multiple components needed to achieve complete removal of the problem? We've talked about that. Is there some kind of correlation going on? It's usually not just one thing, it's several things that could be causing the root cause. Will the solution completely remove that root cause? Is there a possibility that the solution could cause other problems? Have you ever run into that? How frustrating is that? You get this thing figured out. I have some kind of mitigation. I've got preventive action in place, and it causes another problem. So now that all needs to be considered. And I know I do. This is a lot to take in. I get it. But this is really, as you saw with the FDA, and this CAPA thing is important, it's critical, and it's got to be done right. All right. What are we trying to achieve here? We've talked a little bit about this. Corrective action, elimination of the cause or causes of an existing non-conformity or undesirable situation in order to prevent recurrence, right? Preventive action, steps to continuous improvement and to prevent occurrence. So that is where this comes into play. I apologize, this word, and I'll fix this before I send it out. Corrective action is to prevent recurrence. Preventive action is to prevent occurrence, okay? But that's the essence of what we're trying to do. You don't want it to reoccur, and you certainly don't want it to occur. I apologize if that is confusing based on this slide, but those two words are very, very important. Is it occurring or is it a reoccurrence? Only with a reoccurrence should a CAPA be initiated. Okay, approval for the CAPA and corrective action. Does the CAPA truly address the root cause? Can the solutions, even with the cost, be implemented? Is there a clear understanding of the overall impact? The timelines and responsibilities, are they agreed to? What kind of teeth can you put to the process to make sure that the people who are supposed to do what they're going to do get done what they're supposed to get done, right? That's project management right there, project management 101. There should be a project plan, right? You need some way to track these things and make sure that the steps are being corrected. And this is the reason I go back to this, why you don't want to do a CAPA for every incident. You only want to do these CAPAs for reoccurring issues, because this is a lot of work. I know it is, and it's just overwhelming at times. Use them sparingly, but effectively. Implementation of the action plan. What now? All of these required tasks and described in the action plan should be initiated, completed. Oof, that can be a big one. But most importantly, documented. What is it in terms of FDA world? If it's not documented, it didn't occur. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if it's not properly documented in the FDA world, it did not occur, okay? And now you should have a complete record of the actions taken to correct the problem and ensure it will not recur. There should be documented and traceable history, and it should go all the way. So you may need to initiate change management off of CAPA, engineering controls, regulatory validation, of course, quality sign-off, document change control. And if retraining is used, and again, a lot of times that gets abused in terms of the amount of retraining and that's the root cause. But if there is training that occurs, that's part of your CAPA package, right? These are all the documents, the supporting evidence. Again, as an inspector, I'm going to look at a CAPA form and I'm going to see that retraining was done, there was an engineering change control, there was a document change. If I'm going to really dig in, I want to go back and actually see that that work has been completed. That is a CAPA, it's a package that gets put together. And here I state, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So complete the action plan. Here's some of the, the roles and responsibilities. Update the procedure, redesign a process, add an inspection step, implement additional training, switch suppliers. That is a big, big effort, but sometimes that's what's necessary. If you have raw materials coming in or packaging materials and they're just consistently out of specification and they're causing problems further down the line, you may need to actually determine part of the CAPA to switch suppliers. Modify manufacturing storage equipment. What are we talking here? Might be talking revalidation, right? Maybe verification, but if you're actually talking about modifying the process based on your process validation, you might need to revalidate. Change of policy. It may just be we need to refocus the effort here and show what the organization needs to do. And finally, thank you so much for the attention today, because I just know this is a lot of information to take in. It is for me as well. Managing the effectiveness, the monitoring phase. Use a selected sample of significant corrective and preventive actions to determine the effectiveness. Use a selected sample. In other words, we're going to do a spot check. At 3 months, I'm going to have a trigger in my electronic system that sends me a task reminder as a notification to say, you need to go back and take a look at the last week of information to make sure that the preventive action that we put in place is actually working. It can be accomplished by reviewing product or quality problem trend results. There's that word again. You've seen several words pop up today. Trend is one of those very, very important words when it comes to CAPA. Determine if there's any similar product or quality problems after the implementation of corrective or preventive action. And determine if the firm has verified or validated the corrective action problems to ensure that these actions are effective and do not adversely affect the finished product. So a lot of companies, and I've seen a lot of 483s, and I've worked through this myself, where you'll do the CAPA determination, you'll do the containment activity, you'll do the corrective action. We've come up with this, what we believe is the best possible preventive action ever, and yet I don't do the periodic or the follow-up. And so at the end of the day, that CAPA really hasn't solved anything. Now let me talk through this real quickly. So in my world, I like to see once preventive actions are identified and put in place, I kind of like to see that the CAPA gets closed at that point, and the effectiveness check is really a separate process to verify. The effectiveness check and the results of that effectiveness check should be included as part of the CAPA package, because you do have to show an inspector that not only did we create this great preventive action, but it actually worked. But in my world, I don't like to see CAPAs left open for the effectiveness check. That is a determination that you have to make based on your own business rules and requirements. I like to see that CAPA closed after the preventive action is put in place, and then the effectiveness check is actually a separate kind of activity or function. Okay? All right. Take a quick sip of coffee here. That, of course, should be tea in many of your worlds. I love a good tea. But yeah, as you know, here in the States, we drink a lot of coffee. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And again, feel free to email me. I'm on LinkedIn as well. It's Fischer with a C, so it's Fischer. Happy to address any questions or make any connections.
On behalf of SoftExpert, thank you for the presence of everyone who participated in this event. If you have any questions, please contact the presenter via email. To see other webinars, ebooks, and white papers on this subject, please visit our website. Find out more about SoftExpert solutions for business compliance, innovation, and digital transformation. Thanks for listening. See you next time.